In a previous video, I briefly introduced the PT, or the prior taxpayer, or the perpetual traveler concept. I'll put a link to it in the description and potentially on the video as well. But that concept is part of 5 flag or 6 flag theory. The number changes a little bit because it started with 3 flags. It's now grown up to 7 just as technology increases. But it's all essentially the same idea. But with the PT concept, which is the perpetual traveler concept, and the 5 flag theory, it's kind of this chicken and egg situation where the PT and the flags are naturally symbiotic. So you are a perpetual traveler and you use the flag theory to maximize your privacy or to minimize governmental interference via taxes or otherwise. But you also use the flag theory as part of the PT. So they kind of work together. But today on Renegade News, we're going to discuss the best attitudes and the people who make the best PTs and the best approach for becoming a perpetual traveler and what you need as an attitude to actually be successful. Welcome back to Renegade News. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski. Every week on this channel, we discuss the latest news, strategies, and tactics for breaking free from the system, paying less tax, and living anywhere in the world that you want. So let's just kind of jump right into this PT concept. And just as a quick recap, what it means is different things to different people. And it has a very fluid nature because it's really the way you design your life. But there's a few different popular definitions that people use. They use things like permanent tourists or passing through, a private traveler, previous taxpayer, a privacy tactician, a possibility thinker. Others are now calling it post-tyranny, living post-tyranny. But mostly speaking, PTs, however you define it, they're basically interested in your individual sovereignty and being independent of any location or jurisdiction, particularly the jurisdiction that they were born into, but that they've actively chosen to not be a part of and chosen to be a part of another jurisdiction or location. Ultimately, most of them avoid any type of full-time obligations that are tied to any one country. Or so in other words, they're really somebody who's just passing through, which is where the passing through idea came from, and someone who isn't really staying that long in any one place. You can kind of think of it this way. Why did the PT cross the border? Well, it was to get to a new country where they treat tourists better than they treat their own citizens. And that's why it becomes a lot more transient, because you find that many countries treat tourists better than they treat their own people. So therefore, by choosing to be a permanent tourist, you always get that better treatment. They also do it to reduce taxes. They do it to avoid civic duties in certain cases. Certain countries where you're forced into military service, for example, one would be one example. Could be to just skip jury duty or to avoid jury duty in another case if that's something you totally disagree with. They also do it to increase their privacy and to increase their personal freedom. And lots of people do it for all of those reasons above. So becoming this permanent traveler is simple, but it's not easy. The thing you have to understand that the governments don't interfere with these PTs, these perpetual tourists, because they're considered to be tourists and they're not considered to be legal residents. So the government tends to ignore them a lot. So you might be wondering then, if you know anything about the flag theory, is that 2 of the flags, original 5 flags, called for a permanent residency somewhere. And they also called for a second passport somewhere. And you might think that this is a direct contradiction of being this spectral perpetual tourist. And that is a good catch. That's something that a lot of people don't notice right off the bat. But what you have to realize is that, well, in the past, it was possible to become stateless and become this perpetual traveler, even if you didn't have things like a passport. Today, in today's world, not having a state that you belong to and not having a residency is becoming much more difficult. It's almost impossible now to travel anywhere without a passport, and to be actually stateless, you're generally stuck in one country by doing that. And if you don't have a legal residency, the country where you're owned, that you're born in, could claim ownership of you and decide that, well, if you're not a resident anywhere else, then you're a resident here. And really, any country that you traveled through, if you didn't have a legal residence in some place, they could say, well, you've stayed here, and then they might want you to become a permanent resident of that country, at least for the purposes of taxes. So by strategically getting a passport that gives you the travel freedoms that you want, while not tying you in to a tax structure like the U.S. passport does, as a U.S. citizen, you're owed taxes anywhere in the world that you live. But most other passports allow you to travel freely without actually taxing citizens. So it doesn't matter that you have that passport to travel with. What matters is you have the passport at all. Also, the same thing with residency. If you get residency in a country that only taxes income within that country, for example, then at least you now have a residency, so you can prove to your residency back home, wherever it is that you come from, that you can prove that you are now a resident of somewhere else. You can get out of those tax and those other resident obligations that you have. Now, all of that was a little bit confusing, and that is to highlight a point that in order to be a really successful PT, you need to have a meticulous attention to detail. So unless you can afford to buy a 5-figure personal strategy where somebody does all this for you, and it's possible to do that. For 5 figures, you can get agencies and lawyers and tax consultants that are going to dot all your I's and they're going to cross all your T's. And that is a possibility. That's something we can help you out with if you're interested in. And it's not a bad idea if you can afford it, but it's not necessarily. If you carefully follow the advice that I've set out in the Renegade channel and in our Renegade movement community, then that PT lifestyle is within reach for most people. But the key is you have to want it bad enough, and you have to be committed to making your 5-flag strategy work. So that's going to mean research. It's going to be being meticulous in the details of how you actually structure your life, where you get your citizenship flag, where you plant your permanent residency flag, where you plant your banking flags. All of those things matter. You can't just go out into the world and say, well, I'm moving here, because somebody's going to claim ownership over you and you're going to get yourself into trouble. And that's why there are several character traits of PTs that tend to be more successful than others. Some people who try the PT lifestyle go at it all wrong, and they end up in prison just by traveling to their home country, or even by not traveling to their home country. The US, for example, has really long arms if you don't do things correctly. One of the things that you're going to find is that many perpetual travelers have a history of being challenging to their superiors, because those superiors often resent their unorthodox skills and the ways that they complete their jobs. And a lot of them kind of have a forceful personality as well. Not all, but some do. But in other words, PTs are known for not doing too well in traditional, conventional jobs and in conventional lives. They're not conventional people. That's why we call them renegades. Many of them aren't known for their patience either. But as a PT, that is a trait that you're going to have to develop, because one of the major negatives of this PT, this perpetual traveler lifestyle, is a death by bureaucracy and paperwork. Because you have to plant these flags and you have to do it right, one of the things you're going to have to get used to is dealing with paperwork. You're going to have to deal with bureaucracy. A lot of the countries that we want to set up flags, the bureaucracy can be huge. So that's something that you have to watch for. But most perpetual travelers do learn how to develop that patience, and they realize that it becomes part of the process. They, however, really never get used to dealing with the bureaucracy, and that's why we call them renegades. One of the things that PTs are most known for, though, is their grit. And they find that their past failures actually energize them to seek out future potential. And that's one thing with this lifestyle, is most of us have gone through failures. We've mostly made mistakes. A lot of us, because our attitudes didn't get along well in traditional jobs, we've made mistakes in the perpetual traveler lifestyle that we've all learned from. We also tend to have the following traits. We thrive on freedom of choice. That's probably one of the number one things that you're going to find with perpetual travelers is we want to have the choice to go where we want, do what we want, spend time with the people that we want to spend time with, essentially do whatever we want, whenever we want, wherever we want in the world, as long as we're not hurting somebody else. But in order to do that, you also need to have the courage to take risks. And there are risks to this lifestyle. You're risking financial, you're risking personal, relationship. There's all sorts of risks. There's safety risks. There's all sorts of things that can happen. During the pandemic, several people got locked into countries that maybe they didn't want to plan on staying, but were locked in there for years because they just happened to have chose to visit there at a time. So there are things that you have to be aware of. You also need the ability to create several different plans and spend time achieving the goals in those plans. But even with that plan, you have to sometimes gamble. Nothing's guaranteed in life. But as long as you have a clear understanding of those odds, gambling is fine, that risk is fine. You need to actually do that in order to step out of the status quo. You also, because of those things, you need to have superb emotional control, and you have to be capable of remaining calm in the most difficult situations. And everybody has a different experience with this, but a lot of perpetual travelers will find themselves in some pretty difficult situations. You're dealing with a country whose processes and systems are completely different from what you're used to. You're dealing with a different language. You're dealing with different cultures. You may be dealing with safety issues or legal issues. Doing the wrong thing can get you into legal trouble really easily in certain places, and those can be extremely stressful to deal with. So you have to be able to remain calm, keep your head, because losing it is like the worst thing you could do in those situations. You also need to almost thrive on multiple layers of a complex reality. With flag theory and being in that perpetual traveler lifestyle, you're dealing with several different layers of your life. You're planting residency flags in one place. You're planting citizenship flags in another. You might be living in someplace completely different. Your bank accounts and your business might be entirely different countries or jurisdictions. And you have several layers that you're piling on top of everything that you used to have in one place is now spread out around the world. So that does add multiple layers of that complex reality to you. And not only just dealing with it, it's better if you can actually thrive in those types of situations. And thriving in those types of situations means that you have a healthy mind, spirit, and body. And yes, it's possible to be a successful perpetual traveler without a healthy body. I doubt it's without a healthy mind and spirit. I think it'd be really difficult. You could do it without a healthy body, but having a healthy body makes everything so much easier, whether that's standing in line for hours to get a residency card or just enjoying the place where you are to the max. Everything we do in life is just better with a healthy body. And the final trait that I think is super important to be a successful PT, you really want life to be an epic adventure, where you're heading towards a happy ending, but where the journey getting there is half the fun. If you don't enjoy the journey of getting there, then it's all a waste because you don't know when that ending is going to be. And really, that's what this is all about. It's about a journey. It's about a journey to more freedom, more personal privacy, more personal autonomy in your life. And becoming a PT, a perpetual traveler, a prior taxpayer, a perpetual tourist, however you want to describe it, it really is a vital step for anyone who's searching for more privacy, freedom, and independence in this unfree world. We all have different goals. We all have different dreams. We're all going to go about it different ways. But in order to have this true freedom and independence, adopting a flag theory almost has to be a part of that. Even if you stay in your own country, planting flags outside of your country and diversifying internationally really has to be a part of your overall plan, or you're never going to have that privacy and that freedom and that independence, especially when everything is just in one place. Having that independence is next to impossible because somebody will always own you. But there are certain nuances to doing this, and you need to understand them. And understand that the 5 flag theory or the 6 flag theory and the PT lifestyle is really only part of that true renegade lifestyle. And that's why you really should subscribe to Renegade News right now and join the Renegade movement, which is a free community that I'll link to in the comments below. And by becoming a part of that community and joining this channel, you're going to learn the different strategies, the different techniques, the different nuances that many of us have learned by actually going through this journey. And it's going to shorten the path for you to do the same as well. Every week on these channels, we're diving into the nitty-gritty of finding more freedom and more independence and breaking free from the chains of the system. Also, while you're here, check out the video that you see on the screen right now. I'm going to link to another PT video because we have a few videos in this series. But we also talk about things like cryptocurrency. We talk about the best places to plant flags. We talk about alternative investments and other tax reduction strategies. So check them all out. I'm Glenn Kowalski from Renegade News, and I'll see you over there.